So that's it. I think we're live. Okay, awesome. So I think we should like wait 2-3 minutes, let people kind of join in, click the links
Sure.
that they just got, all of that. And in the meantime, I'll use the time to say hello to everybody. Hello to everybody who are joining us, and welcome to the third and very special panel of the Internal Compass Shalom 2020 Jazz Festival. This panel is dedicated to entrepreneurship in 2020. Um, and I'm here with two very, very special guests, both from New York City, and both are in New York City right now, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Henrique Eisenmann and Mr. Jason Yeager, uh, both piano players, both are incredible musicians and incredible entrepreneurs and human beings. So I'm really excited, guys, about having this conversation with you. Um, I will say that really this is part of a week of events, which includes, the panels, the concerts. If you haven't been, able to watch stuff and you're curious, you can always go back and watch it. Everything is recorded and everything is accessible later. I will tell to our viewers and listeners that we do see everything you are writing to us in the chat. So feel free to write your thoughts, your comments, your questions, because we are here and we would love to take this conversation where you guys want it to go to. Um, and then um, yeah, I think let's start. Right? You guys okay? You guys feel good to start? Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I don't know. Until today, all the panels were like more than three, but three I feel is a little bit like playing in trio that you can just interrupt each other and really feel comfortable. So maybe we'll not. I don't know. Maybe we won't necessarily do it in like a round way that everybody says their opinion. And feel free to just jump in. I want to start with asking you something that's not even really entrepreneurship related directly, which is like, where did the pandemic catch you?
Well, I was. I mentioned this in the artists panel on Sunday, but I was actually in Wuhan, China, between January 12th and 17th, something like that, and it hit the front page of the New York Times on whatever the Wednesday of that week was, like the 14th or something. And just before, I think maybe the day I got on the plane to go to China, and I had been to Wuhan a couple times. Speaking of entrepreneurship, I met an entrepreneur through a musician friend. And this guy he lives in China and he also lives in the United States. And he was setting up a music program, and he brought me over there um, to teach jazz piano, to do some concerts, and this was the third such trip. But just before I left, a saxophonist named Randy DePommier, who was going with me, he said, "Hey, I just read about this new mysterious pneumonia. They say it can only be transmitted, that it can't be transmitted between people." I was a little worried, but I talked to our friend in China, and he says it's cool. I just want to let you know this is happening. And I saw that, but nothing was canceled, nothing was closed. And while we were there, then it became this huge international news story, and we got out of Wuhan just maybe 3 days before they shut down the airport in Wuhan. So that was pretty surreal. None of us got sick. Um, I tested negative for the COVID antibodies later on, but it was weird to have been so recently in the city where it all started. And then I heard about things kind of shutting down. Um, I teach up I teach part time up in Boston at Berklee College of Music, and we got word that the rest of the week was canceled, and maybe everything else was shutting down. This was a serious pandemic, and then it was kind of a mess. I was freaking out, um, about the health of my family members. What about all the stuff that was on my calendar for the spring? So that was like March 10th or 9th or something like that. Yeah, it was weird.
Wow,
It's
crazy.
incredible, incredible story. And well, I think, to begin, I think that the crisis, the pandemic, is a public health crisis, but it is a public opinion crisis with direct impact in art. It's not only about things shutting down and hospitals being full, but it's about each person asking him or herself, what do you really believe? Who do you believe? You know, and at the same time, do I believe this pandemic enough so that I'm not going to make any plans because things are going to get back to normal? Or should I trust the authorities and understand that this is really bad and I should make really long-term plans? So I think this has been an ethical dilemma, you know which is why I think it's so interesting to talk about entrepreneurship in this context, because money implies an ethical dilemma all the time. Ideas and money, it's completely connected. And in a moment, in a situation like this, where like every decision that you make is informed by some sort of like dilemma that you have to solve. Like, should i should I book this tour or not? Is it going to be canceled or not? Do I trust that there will be a vaccine or not? Do I trust the mayor or the governor of my city? So I think this type of what I call like the post-truth crisis of a society that doesn't know anymore who to believe, and what opinion to take, or where anyone can just suddenly invent his or her own opinion, led society to a completely new territory where like we each had to like cut through the jungle of misinformation and try to find our core and revisit where our real moral principles to re-inform our artistic choices. So I think for me it has been a moment of a lot of inner explorations, kind of reevaluating what I consider to be really important, what are the choices that I'm going to make, you know, and then trying to find also that ethical way or that moral way to do, to use the internet or social media or whatever method you want to try to create art that is still honest, relevant, and trying not to bullshit, which I think is a because to bullshit with your art right now, to be dishonest about your art, it's playing exactly on this problem of misinformation or of like post-truth, of not knowing what to believe in. So the stronger your principles are, the more confident I was feeling, at least with the things that I was doing or with the choices that I was pursuing. So I think kind of like I see the pandemic as, a tragic event that forced everybody to revisit and open their eyes and then make choices and rethink everything.
Yeah, I think I actually I want to ask you both about like so so basically you are both pianists, choose to be living in New York. And I think it's almost by definition, uh, there is a lot of leveraging in this choice. Like you are going to a place where you actually are counting on playing a lot, and you're counting on being like very busy performing. And I could imagine, but you can talk about it more, that this is also part of the main reason why you're there. And I think if we had a conversation about entrepreneurship and music in like December 2019, we would probably all be saying the world is open, you can fly anywhere. This is such a great time to be an independent musician and just play, do your thing, plan it, and then all of a sudden, all these like things that we are building our lives according to, I think, in many ways, and that musicians all around the world have been building their life according to, that's like collapsing in days, and this world is gone. So I would be curious to hear your take on this, and also about just like the New York aspect, just like what was New York like, and what's being in New York, and how does it feel to be in New York in this time.
Well, in a
Mm.
certain way, it's almost not relevant right now what city I live in. You know what I mean? You're absolutely right that I came to New York. It was 10 years ago in September. And I came here because this is where um, the greatest concentration of creative, excellent musicians from many different fields and genres were most densely concentrated. So this is where I wanted to be, and and then part of that, of course, is hopefully finding opportunities to play. Um, I think the when everything started to shut down, of course, New York was the first epicenter of the pandemic in the United States, and that was scary. Especially in late March, April, even into May, the streets were pretty quiet except for ambulance sirens that you would hear. That was pretty crazy and surreal. Um, I, I guess one good thing about being in a city is everything is close at hand. So necessities from the grocery store, drugstore, whatever, that's convenient. But it it raises the question: will New York ever be back? We've lost some really precious venues since this pandemic started. Most recently and notably, the Jazz Standard. They say they're going to try to reopen somewhere somehow, but we'll have to see. And yeah, I kind of feel like while I know a lot of people have left New York City, I don't know a lot of my New York musician friends who have left. And I kind of feel like people still will want to be here for the music and artistic scene, even if opening up takes a while and is gradual. I wonder what you think, Enrique, or if you
Good.
know people who have left.
I know a lot of people who left, mostly people who are not Americans, because
Mm,
the situation became also progressively hard for immigrants.
right.
Once many of the things like unemployment, for example, you cannot receive unemployment as an immigrant, or it can affect, otherwise it may affect your visa situation, things like that. And but I did see an exodus, from to outside of the city. And I see a division. I don't know if you notice that, but I see a very clear division between, especially in the jazz world. Now if you talk specifically about the jazz musical community, a very clear division between musicians who immediately embraced the new forms of you know delivering art, internet, Facebook lives, doing little video collaborations with each window, recording at home, trying to do something, engaging with someone else, and a division of those who I would call the conservative part of, where of people who didn't want to just to sit down and wait, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I've
Mm-hmm.
seen many famous musicians who chose to wait and not,
Mm-hmm.
not embrace, because many people are against like um, YouTube Live or Facebook Live or social media work or anything of that, or like this collaborations over video. And I saw extremely famous people just giving up, think, no, it's gonna get better next week. No, maybe in a month things will get back to normal. I have a tour scheduled, it's gonna happen. And then like such people completely like disappeared or like really, got depressed. On the other hand, I saw like other artists who were immediately saying like, great, let's this door is closed, I'm gonna take another door. And I think this split was very interesting to see. And I saw like musicians like, I am a big fan of Chick Corea, and many of you may know, like watching. Chick Corea was incredible from day one of the pandemic. In the first day of the pandemic, he started hosting these live sessions from his house or studio, I don't know, where he would just practice for 40 minutes. And he would talk about his practice. Oh, now I'm going to play some Mozart. Now I'm going to play this old tune. Wow, check it out. Look at this chord. And it was so interesting from day one of the pandemic. And then he released the Chick Corea Academy with like classes and courses. And now he released a book about like how to play in a band. And now he has all this. So, you may like or not his music, but regardless, he instantly embraced the whole idea of like, yeah, sure, let's, I think that's the maybe one of the lessons that we are learning, that creativity cannot only be concentrated on the notes that you pick. It needs to be connected with how the artist chooses to deliver his art. It doesn't work to be the most creative artist and compose incredible stuff, paint amazing stuff, if you're also not creative with how you're gonna like negotiate that art, send that art to people, make that, reach out, and also capitalize from it, because this is also an essential part of the transaction. At some point you have to receive something back. It's a trade. And so I don't know, I see all this like weird splits, and it doesn't mean that I have a positive attitude towards it, as if oh, this is great. But I think it's like the speed to adapt is perhaps a skill that became clear. Those who have that skill and could really catch up, and those who are still reluctant and are waiting, no, the vaccines are going to come, and then the jazz clubs are going to open, I'm going to get my job back, but maybe with like half the salary, half the income, half the fee. And I don't see a lot of future on that direction, to be honest.
Yeah, I totally hear you. Chick is a great example, because on one hand, you might think, okay, the more established musicians have a financial cushion. They're older. They may just think this is all BS to do live streams or do virtual collaborations. But Chick Corea is an example of somebody who's being entrepreneurial, and he's in his late 70s. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think for me, I was able to do some outdoor gigs when outdoor dining was happening in the summer, and I can say that it's definitely not sustainable. The money is a lot less because those restaurants and clubs and venues were hurting. They were hurt. This was like 5 months ago, and they're going to be hurting even more next time they open, if they open. So I think in a way, this is being adaptable and being entrepreneurial about how you deliver your music or your art to your audience is a, I don't want to call it a silver lining, but it is a benefit, because who knows what other kinds of natural disasters, illness, other things that could happen in your life that keep you from performing, but maybe don't keep you from creating. And that's what this pandemic has done. It's kept us from regular live performance, but not from continuing to create. And one of the first things I started doing was a live stream series, very low budget, very simple, called Quarantunes, and I do it with my fiance Julie, who's a singer. But like over time, we've gotten a little more sophisticated. A ring light, which I'm using right now to make me look all bright and shiny, and some nice microphones. Actually, they're not that nice, but they're better than what the devices come with. And those were investments that we made over time. So part of entrepreneurship, if you think about it as developing a business, or a business, enacting a business model, that requires some investment. And of course, for a lot of people, especially my friends who were getting 75 to 100% of their income on gigs, this was a devastating year. I feel very fortunate that I was able to move my teaching work onto Zoom and do it remotely. But that was not perfect either. At the beginning, I because I knew people were hurting for some private students, I cut rates. I didn't want to. I thought lessons over Zoom are not going to be as good as lessons in person. So, and maybe this will only be for a couple of months, so I'll cut my rates. But here we are. And then I invested. I got a stand so I could suspend another camera over my hands when I teach, and I got hip to some other software that would hook up to my MIDI keyboard and show the student what I'm playing in real time. It's called Chordy app, if anybody's interested. I think adapting to the technology and the new way of putting the art out there has forced me to spend a little bit of money. I was, especially at the beginning, extremely conservative, buying the cheapest of everything, just because, not only was the pandemic raging, the economy was in total free fall. It's still not great, so many people are hurting. But if you can, find ways to make your home a performance space, or a teaching studio a little bit more, that's one way to start adapting.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You know, one aspect that I think it's interesting, and I agree with you. I also have a ring light and my little stand. You know, we invested in this, but this is an important point. The reason you invested in this is because you understood that this is kind of the direction that things is going, that things are going. You understood that Zoom teaching is legitimized now as something okay. I think the pandemic gave the green light for artists to kind of try new stuff and
Mm-hmm.
take the risk. You have nothing to lose. You know, you already lost all of your gigs, you lost all of your tours. You know, I'm here with a keyboard, my piano is in storage. You know, what can I do? You know what? I'm gonna try. I have nothing to lose. So somehow you started to see a lot of also like big musicians doing really low key live streams, you know? So maybe you feel like you did a low key live stream, but I've seen like really famous singer songwriters like with a crappy sound at their homes, you know? So if they can do, why can't I do as well? So this is one aspect that I think can be a good incentive now for if you have an idea of a project that you want to do, a new concert series, a new collaboration, a new lecture, whatever, you know, now is the moment. There's a green light. Try. You have absolutely nothing really to lose. And also like the internet is a democratic space. It is cheap. You can do things spending very little money. You don't need to rent a hall. You don't need to rent the best, a camera. You don't need like a team of audio engineers. There's a lot that you can do from home. And this perhaps became like the big lesson, that we all understood that like music education, for example, works online. It works. It is not the same as meeting in person, but it does work. And more than that, it democratizes music education. Now we understand that you can actually teach people from all over the world, and then you can connect to musicians who are like really far, or from places where like students would never have access, for example, to like a good teacher. And now you're able to like teach some of these people or share materials, or like some small kid from a distant country can become famous because of a viral YouTube video, or so I think I see a lot of reluctance many times in modern, in current in many jazz musicians about the use of social media as a dishonest space, which of course it is a reality. But at the same time, I think as artists we have the duty to know how to use the tools that we have available. And there's so much need for art nowadays. The world needs art. I love that like small quote saying like, if you think art is not important, think what would you have done during the quarantine with no art in your life, with no music, no movies, no books. It's not worth living. Art, right? There's no, it's not really not worth living. And the world is craving for art. And I think we have this responsibility to like deliver our art. So, and anyways, I think, my first project on quarantine, which is different, but it did check on all of these things that I've mentioned, was the maybe 1 or 2 weeks after the actually the quarantine period started, the lockdown started on mid March in New York. I decided to host Zoom open lectures on I would just post the link and say like, what, I just want to hang out with people and share. And everybody's so stressed. There's like 2,000 people dying per day. I think we need a relief. So I'm like, every Saturday at noon I'm gonna teach a lecture. Let me see what can I do. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I know I can do like a general Brazilian music history, like 1 hour course. And then I wasn't expecting a lot of people to come, but maybe 75 people showed up, which was really nice, and participated. I'm like, wow, that's great. Let me do another one. And I was doing it for free. I felt like this was my gift to the community. And I did maybe 6 or 7 of those. Every week I would come up with a different theme. Oh, today I'm going to talk about Bach, or today I'm going to talk about Stravinsky and jazz, or and it was really good. I engaged with the community. I used social media. It was really helpful to bring the community together. And every week I got a new private student thanks to that. And a new private student, in New York term, means extra $500 a month in your income. So, you start to collect, so that offering, that open masterclass became a really interesting recruiting tool to get students. So it's like a win-win situation. The community wins because it receives a free class. I win because I'm happy teaching, engaging with people, and I also get these private students, and the private students also get the connection, the contact. So this became like really a really important part that then led me to make a lot of other decisions throughout the semester. And I think the main one that has been my entrepreneurial kind of endeavor has been the creation of Jazz Lab, which is, it was a summer program at the New England Conservatory where I teach. And then I decided to move the program outside, away from NEC, and have it as my own project. So Tim Linhard, who's my friend, and we both direct the program, decided to open an actual company, an LLC, and actually have it as an online jazz academy where we bring several different teachers, master classes, and talk about like creative music, history, social change, and topics that we consider to be very interesting. But it all started because of those like very simple Zoom lectures that I started doing, open classes. So because there was no fear of failing, because everything was failed already, I felt the impulse and the courage to do it. And nowadays there is a new program that is like thriving thanks to maybe some of those initiatives.
I want to ask you something, which is, first of all, I want to say this is, I think it's going in a really interesting direction. When I think sometime in January, I gathered the faculty of the Internal Compass Institute here in Mitzpe Ramon, and I was like, guys, this seems to be an issue with teaching coming up. And I just want to make a test that we can all teach online in the case that we're going to have to. And I remember that, like, when I did it, it really seemed like imaginary that we wouldn't be able to meet, And I met with all the students, and I was like, listen, this might be the last time that we meet physically in the semester. And students are, of course, laughing and blah, blah, blah. But, like 72 hours, and that's amazing lesson that I learned during 2020 is like 72 hours can change completely the way you perceive life, because Friday everything seemed like okay, there is maybe, and then by Monday it's like everything is closed and they decided on the quarantine. And so I think we were able to do the whole second semester completely online. And I think it was okay. I can't say that it was bad. I think the faculty and the students, with mutual effort, pushed through, which taught me another great lesson, which is people is everything. Like a bunch of people can make everything happen. However, by the time we finished the semester, everybody were like, no, no more. Next year is not in the Zoom. And I think that's something that I'm curious to hear what your thoughts about, because I think, again, if we were talking in the end of 2019 about like online education and online music education, we would probably be saying stuff like online music education is the future. And, in the future, probably we will all be able to teach online. And this is something. And then, like, everybody had to, like, at once move to online. And this is great. It brings a lot of opportunities. But I'm pretty sure, like what do you think now? Like, is the future of education online? Is it sustainable to teach online for a long time? And I would like to even go more specific and say, like, colleges and universities, especially in the US, are quite expensive. Like, is it worth your money if it's online, and to what extent?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think it depends what age group we're talking about. It depends what format the class takes. Um, I teach mostly one-on-one lessons, and those seem to be pretty adaptable, at least with regard to piano online. Now, the biggest drawback is I can't play live simultaneously with a student. Um, but what online has caused me to do is to develop more tools, techniques, handouts, materials to send to my students between lessons or even share during lessons that I otherwise would not have thought to create if we were in person. I would just show them on a piano, in the room. And so it's pushed me to be, I think, a more thoughtful teacher, a more prepared teacher. Um, but I also know from having taught some group classes that it can be really difficult to feel like you're reaching the students, to feel like they are engaged. It's hard to get feedback if it's a big group and maybe some people have their screens off. They're in their pajamas, they don't want to have their screens on or whatever. Um, and I do think, it's interesting what you said, like in December 2019, would we have been like, yeah, online is the future? I actually think I would have been like, online is total BS. It's not the way to learn. This is me personally. Like, we should be in person. Music is about real time collaboration and getting the feel and the sound isn't the real sound, and the timing is, there's latency on the internet. Um, but I'm actually convinced that for certain formats and for a certain age group, you have to have a certain maturity and a level of emotional and cognitive development to be able to handle focusing online. It's not easy. It's definitely harder, I think, to focus on the computer. Um, but I do think it adds a valuable tool. And like Enrique was saying, I've picked up private students during the pandemic who would never have thought of working with me, probably because they live in another state or another city or another country. And so it has collapsed distances in a way that it definitely could have a year ago. We all knew this technology existed, but we weren't forced to use it so much for teaching. Um, and then, and yeah, finally, when it comes to like higher education, I think it does. I hope it forces institutions, especially private ones, to really reconsider their business model and think about what it is students are paying for and whether it's justifiable to maintain such high levels of tuition. And I do know that at Berkeley, for example, what's interesting is, we were all remote in the fall, and now we're going to a hybrid model where students can choose to take certain classes in person, only a few. I have a health condition which puts me at greater risk of complications for COVID-19, so I'm going to keep studying remotely. And I was worried that this would mean nobody wanted to take my classes because they want, my classes are being offered in person too, and the idea is, well, the students are they're so hungry to get back. But a lot of students are also choosing to stay remote because there's the big public health issue that still, yes, there's great news about the vaccine, but until, I don't know, 70% of people are vaccinated, they're saying, this pandemic, this virus can still run wild. So um, I'm not a fan of online teaching, but it's been a saving grace in a very difficult time for a lot of musicians and a lot of students.
Yeah. Yeah. Good points, Jason. I agree with you. I think there has been, for the past, I would say maybe 10 years, I think because of the internet, there has been a gradual process of individualization of the artistic creation, you know, and so which leads us to, to this, what I call the Jacob Collier paradigm, the one man show, who does his own production. He plays drums, he plays guitar, he plays piano, he sings 5 million voices, and this is something that I consider to be a special trait of American music. I think it's very individualistic compared to musical cultures elsewhere. And of course, jazz is about the group, is about interaction. True. But there's something about the individual. It's a trio of 3 individuals, and nothing wrong with that. I think it's perfectly fine. But I think with the addition of internet and jazz education becoming a very individualized kind of act, it leads us to a process that was already happening pre-pandemic of like, I'm gonna do my own production, I do everything, I'm the one-man orchestra. And so I think the pandemic only like increased and gave, amplified a little bit of that tendency, which is sad because on the other side it destroys kind of the collectivity, the collective aspect of music making. If you play like percussion in a percussion ensemble, forget about it. It's not going to happen. So it is a dangerous, I think it's a dangerous moment. And it's also dangerous how we are relating this to also like big corporations who are starting to control the means of production. Because to use the Marxist term, we for the past 10 years, or let's say 20 years of internet, we have owned the means of production ourselves. You release your music in your home studio, you sell it on Bandcamp, you post your own videos, you do everything yourself, you make the money. And little by little, I feel that there is a kind of like this bigger companies are starting to learn how to like funnel things into their pools, and kind of take control over these areas like Spotify, for example, or even Facebook and Instagram, with how they're like starting to monetize live stream and things like this, and kind of like taking over control. And I think the same parallel applies to universities or higher education. I'm starting to realize already for some months, like, why do I need to teach at a university? It used to be a space where people get together, is a collective space, a space of encounters, and now suddenly, really, it has become irrelevant. I can teach, I can teach the same class that I teach at the New England Conservatory on my own, and just announce for half the price. And I'm going to make more. The students are going to pay less. The system is flawed. It is that simple. So I'm hoping for some sort of anti-establishment rebellion in this sense, because I think this will really transform the market a little more. And of course, we're still talking about online education, and it is imperfect. But to answer that question of Ehud saying like everybody has like Zoom fatigue, no one can deal anymore with another Zoom, like it's true. First, I think younger generations are going to get used to it, the same way that like maybe 30 years ago it would be unthinkable that we are, you're going to have to spend so many hours on a computer. Nowadays we kind of do it. Second aspect, I think, as educators, perhaps one way that we can do that is also to learn how to give a new sense of purpose to learning art, whereas not only that individual paradigm of the Jacob Collier paradigm, but like I like the idea of like remembering that music is also social action, is like it leads to social change, and there is a great way to now give value and purpose to music by aligning it to other causes as well. So which I think can give a new impulse to society, to know that like do a Zoom meeting like this and engaging with everybody around the world is an anti-establishment act. It is kind of an act of resistance, where we are, despite all the problems, like getting together, teaching each other, learning, doing our own kind of businesses. And hopefully this will be kind of like become kind of the new paradigm that eventually can lead to, when things open up, to maybe different types of collective experience, not through the music making, but maybe through feeling that we're all fighting against the same thing. So, I see, Jason, you did a lot of things that had with, a social change purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and it affects so much. It's so beautiful, like I remember seeing like, oh, this is a great idea. I think you're on point, and so the feeling of collectivity didn't come from maybe the music making at the same time, but from the experience of like experiencing the same struggle, and going together is an act of compassion, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, man, that's a great point. I think, there was, especially around the awful killing of George Floyd, there was this sense of solidarity, that I like. It's almost like people people outside the black community and maybe a small cohort of non-black folks like really woke up in a way. And that's interesting because we're all siloed away in our homes, not able to meet up, but we're all seeing this content online about this horrific news, and that really prompted a lot of incredible demonstrations outside, marches. They estimate maybe the largest civil rights march in American history. A good friend of mine, the trumpet player Jason Palmer, did an incredible series that was in turn inspired by John Ellis. Jason Palmer did basically a composition where the notes spelled out the name of Breonna Taylor, right? And Breonna Taylor, who was tragically killed by police in Kentucky, and her killers were not charged. Just awful. But what was brilliant about his project was it wasn't just, I'm going to make this piece of music and, it spells out her name, it looks really cool, and I'll put it up, right? That would have been great. But instead what he did was he contacted a bunch of musical friends, and I was really gratified and happy to be one of them, and said, why don't you overdub your part on top of my part? Here's the video and here's the music, and I want you to record anything you want. And then for many, many days, he would release a different video each day, And every time it would be this very powerful thing of say her name, Breonna Taylor, but a different musical meditation on that name. And these were collaborations across time and space that were made possible by the internet and by technology. And, another, just to tie it back into entrepreneurship, because obviously that's more on the social justice element, but this stuff all dovetails. So many of us in 2020 were forced to learn how to really record ourselves, like not just use the voice memo app, and it's something personally I had not really ever done seriously, and I'm still in my infancy on it, but this is the kind of thing that so many musicians have now. They're recording artists and who work from home, and if you want, and people were doing this before the pandemic, but now it's become a way to earn money and so forth. The project with Jason was totally not for money and not for publicity. It was for a cause. But I think what's beautiful about that, like Henrique was saying, is that even though the social aspect of music is not what it can be, we sort of retain that when we connect over these really sea change political and social events. And so many of them happened in 2020. That was very moving to me, what Jason Palmer did. And I don't know if some folks listening know his music, but he's a fantastic artist and person, and that's just one of many wonderful things he's been up to in 2020.
And first, yes, I love that project, and even if it wasn't done with the goal of making money, I think indirectly all of this like great artistic projects will indirectly at some point capture back that money. This may be one of the big differences that, like, I think there's still reluctance in the jazz community to understand, is that the artist now has become the content creator. To be an artist means to create content, to use the internet jargon. So there is something about like understanding that like the money is not going to come necessarily from the music, from the, you press the key and money drops into your bank account, and as you get a beer and $5 per note,
Yeah, right.
There is something about like in the new model, the new economic model, money is coming always indirectly. You produce free content, you put all your free content, and many people are like, how can you put free content online? You're putting all of your music online for free. Wait, if you need, of course, you need to be very careful in this area, but there's part of the transaction that is you release content and the money doesn't come from the audience. The money come from advertisers, like from whatever, Facebook or Instagram advertisers who see your content, who see that your content is reaching a lot of people. So there's something about like the economic transaction is not anymore so clear. The money comes from here to here. The money has a huge kind of like way until it gets to your bank account, you know? So
Well,
go ahead,
no,
Henrique.
go for it.
So I think, if we can think of like an ethical way, an honest way to become content creators, I think we can also connect to the idea of making money out of it without feeling that you're selling your soul to some, corporation or to some dishonest music making.
Yeah, I can really relate to that, and I can say that like I really think that the one thing I learned that was really important is really the fact that like, we all of us are musicians. All of us like make a living from playing music and doing music and maybe teaching music. And I think it's very, there is no question about the fact that we need to make a living. But I noticed over and over how putting the exact like focus on one single transaction can be really hurtful at times. And that like if you don't learn to see the overall context and you're constantly looking at like this transaction and this transaction and this transaction without seeing the whole thing, your business model is going to end up being like playing wedding gigs, because this is really on the transaction level, this is really what, and like, but there is so much more, and there is so much more, not only in terms of like, not only in terms of like value and community, there is also so much more in terms of just like pure income stuff, and just like creating a wider context, which I think is a lot of like the putting the content up there maybe for free, playing with other people sometimes for free, and like just making music, because I think this, there is a lot to be said about this, but I think that like 2020 have been a year that people did a lot of projects on a low budget or no budget way, but some of those projects end up being like super super meaningful and super cool, and would give the people who did them like so much more than money, or so much more than like the money that you could imagine for the activity or for the gig. And this is really interesting, and this kind of brings me to my next question that I want to ask you. And I think Ehud of the beginning of the pandemic was pretty stressed out. Like I was in panic, I was terrified. And I think we tend to forget, but like when this happened, we didn't know if it was going to be a day or two or 30 years. And like we didn't really also know how bad things are going to go. And I think almost everywhere around the world, there was some moment of terror, that like you are really not sure that this is going to work out. And I remember, for example, that like in the beginning, I made a huge order of like canned food and bottled water, because I was like that scared, and I think that what I want to ask you, like if Ehud of end of December 2020 met Ehud of beginning 2020, I would have told myself, man, listen, it's going to be okay. First of all, it's going to last a while, and it's going to be okay. Because I think that part of the reason that I was so stressed is like when you really don't know if you should be thinking and feeling and planning about this thing as a short-term thing or as a really long-term thing. And there was quite a while where we were like, okay, probably by the summer we're going to be okay, and then like probably by fall it's going, for sure by December, Christmas, we're all going to be celebrating together in like huge dance parties, but like here we are a year after, and I think on one hand the pandemic is still here, we're starting to see the light, but like it's still here. But on the second, like, you know, the world hasn't completely collapsed. Like many people, like Jason said, many people are hurting and the economy took a big hit. But like, you know, it's important to also say we, you know, we are here and we're making music, and it's a big deal. I think it's really a big deal. So what I want to ask you is, you know, if you met yourself, the January 2020 version of yourself, what would you say to yourself? And you can answer this like on the personal level or on the entrepreneurship level or both, you know, feel free to take it wherever you want.
I can share some an idea that I had that I think took time for me to make peace with, and I think it's important. So I would tell myself to like, this is what I would say if I met, my own self a year ago, is that we are about to enter an era of like globalized networking. The new network is the world. And and before that we were kind of localized. Our network was working within our city or state, a few schools, institutions, and a few connections. Ehud in Israel, this other friend is in Germany, something like this. And but perhaps the biggest revolution was to understand that we don't create art, or I'm gonna start replacing art by content. And we don't create content for our conservatory friends, for our colleagues. So if you have an entrepreneurial idea, and or an idea to make money with music, be it create an online course, create an online studio for teaching private classes, do live stream concerts, start recording music for YouTube videos, start composing music for podcasts, start working on creating copyright free music that you sell on your website, start writing a blog about music criticism, start engaging with social justice perspectives, start working on teaching how to do recording for other musicians who don't know recording, starting a blog about music theory, starting a transcription YouTube channel where you put your own transcriptions, starting your own theory thing. Like all of those, when you think about all of these possibilities for one to make money, one of the most important things is that this content should not be designed for your closest friends, for your school teachers, for your music teacher. So here's a very clear example. Maybe you are surrounded by a bunch of musicians who know all of the scales and they know all of the theory. And so you keep thinking like, wow, how can I make something that is completely unique? Sorry, this was unique. How can I make something that's completely unique and different? And this the answer is not there. Maybe your thing is going to be actually to explain how to play a Dorian scale, a harmonic minor scale, and you know how to explain really well, and that's your kind of skill. You're really good in explaining that. There's nothing wrong with you suddenly creating your own music course where you teach how to play a harmonic minor scale. And maybe you think, oh, but this is kind of ridiculous because all my friends are playing all this like complex music and everything. My teachers are gonna, you're not creating content for your network. You're creating content for 7 billion people in the planet, from which 6,900,000,090,900,000 people have no idea what is a harmonic minor scale. So I think if we broaden our view a little bit, we become a little more comfortable understanding that, like, maybe you want to do some transcriptions for like rock songs or something like this, and there is a huge audience for such entrepreneurial ideas. So don't think only about your own circle of like friends who may judge your work, or say if you're being too basic, or if you're not being refined enough, or if you're not being avant-garde enough, or if you're not being jazzy enough, or if whatever. Your audience is way more broad. This for me was like a key revelation.
That's a really great point, Enrique. I think it we can get in our heads, or I can get in my head, at counting some musicians who I admire so much among my friends and my mentors, and it's hard not to think, well, what will so and so think if I do this? But I have to say, one of the beautiful things about some of those basic ideas, whether it's how to learn a song, even a pop song or something that's simple, or a musical, like a rhythm, maybe taking a percussive rhythm, a rhythm played in samba music and applying it to the piano in a new way. Even things that are maybe elemental, those are some of the deepest things. Those are the kinds of things I actually enjoy learning over and over again and feel like I can still benefit from. And I guess if I were meeting myself at the beginning of the pandemic, I would tell myself, first of all, don't worry, you're not patient zero. I was worried that I was patient zero because I came back from Wuhan, and you couldn't get a test, and we had just found out that people can be asymptomatic. I was freaking out. I did eventually get a family friend had access to some antibody tests in the spring, and turns out I had never picked up COVID despite having been in Wuhan.
Wow.
And that's one thing. The other thing is you're going to learn a lot this year. And it's true. I learned a lot. I think the country and the world learned a lot. I think the pandemic ripped open some Band-Aids to expose some greater issues, from racial inequality and police brutality to health disparities to extreme economic inequality, to what it means just to be able to survive and what it means, to work and to earn a living. Nobody is to blame for the creation of this catastrophe. It has been mishandled, that's for sure, by a lot of leaders around the world, particularly in the United States and some other places. But the very fact of it, you can't just say, oh, somebody's out of work, well, that's their fault. No, this is plainly not the case. And so I think we've all collectively learned a lot. I hope we've learned a lot from this pandemic. I hope the outcome of the U.S. presidential election is an affirmation that we've learned something. On a personal level, I've been able to, and this is more on the entrepreneurial side of it, I would tell myself at the beginning of the pandemic, you're going to learn a lot and you're going to invest in your own skills. Like one of the things I did was I took an online class myself in film scoring. I've always been interested in it. My fiance she's in graduate school right now in a MFA program at NYU in acting, and she had to make a short film, and it came out really great. And she used some pre-existing music, but her professor was like, you should submit this to film festivals. This is really nice. Problem is, you can't submit something that has existing copywritten music. So in comes, this is my turn now. I've scored some very short things, but I'm not a film scorer. So I had to on the fly kind of learn how to do that. And after I did that, I later had the opportunity to take an online class, and I've been scoring short scenes, a 12-minute short film, and I'm learning so much about other ways that I can be creative through music. And just like Henrique was saying about, on an individual transaction level, and Ehud too, or these few notes that I wrote or played or recorded, I'm not making money off that now, but if I can develop my skills, put little bits of content out there over time, that may pay back something. Maybe somebody, so I don't know. I think 2020 has been a time that I've been very fortunate, of course, to still have work. Although, the spring was pretty brutal. Spring and summer, so many gigs went, out the door. Events I was really looking forward to were canceled, and many of those paid well too. But on the flip side, I learned these new things, like my fascination now with film scoring, how to record myself decently well and mix and master it, how to edit videos better, how to collaborate, how to play with a click track better. In jazz, we don't play with click tracks that much, but I play in one band that's done a lot of remote recordings, and one of the ways to achieve that is to have a, basically, for those who don't know, have a metronome in your headphone while you play. And it's not like it was uncomfortable for me, but I started noticing some weaknesses in my rhythm and in my time that I wanted to address. And so I have more time now. I'm at home, so I literally have time to develop my time. And there have been little bright spots like that where I think part of being an entrepreneur is being open to learning and being like, okay, that didn't work. Let me try to do it better, or how can I up my game in some way, and whether there's a financial payoff later is another question. But I think since the internet is now the social commons, the place where we all meet. It already kind of was, but now more than ever it is. We as artists are having to be creative about recording, video, teaching content. There are some, I'm sure some, Enrique and Ehud, some artists who have been doing this for a while, and they've been inspiring to me because at the beginning of the pandemic, I would check out their stuff. I'll give a shout out to my friend, another New York pianist, Glenn Zaleski, who puts out brilliant teaching content on his various social media channels. He has since made it into a Patreon page, so he has patrons who pay a monthly fee, and then he also releases some content for free. And I've noticed how his content was already great, but now he's got like fancier visuals and nice curtain behind his piano, and it's all beautifully lit. And I haven't actually talked to him specifically about the production value, but I think he probably would say, well, when this became more the full-time, not the full-time gig, but a bigger part of being an artist, in 2020, he made some changes, and that's inspiring to see a peer do something like that.
Yeah. I have a good friend who is working at Wix. Do you know Wix, the
Yeah.
website? And he said, like, he called me very early in 2020, like after, in the middle of the first, quarantine. And he was like, well, apparently when people sit at home quarantined, everybody are opening a website and start something. And he was like, Wix is booming. We have never seen anything like this because, maybe we have this little entrepreneur within us that just needs time, that just needs to like be forced to sit at home and come up with cool stuff to do. And maybe it's not even a musician's thing, maybe it's just like a thing. But I remember that I heard it and I was like, wow, that's, first of all, it's amazing. Second, congratulations, Wix. And three is like, wow, that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but and okay, so like, first of all, this conversation has been amazing, and I see that we're getting some comments from people that are saying like this is really interesting conversation and blah blah blah. And I will tell those people that if you have any questions for us before we end this, feel free to write them because we're happy to answer. And I will ask you guys, what do you think? Like, okay, we're starting to see as we speak, we're starting to see the light in the end of this tunnel, hopefully, like here in Israel, I think 500,000 people have been getting vaccines already. And it seems to be that like more and more people all over the world are slowly getting their vaccines. And like, at some point we will be on the other side. And what I want to ask you is, what do you think will stay from this new thing that we got? But more interestingly, what do you think will not stay, and what do you think would like and I want to say that I want to take the dangerous guess that I think that people are going to stay away from their computers for a while, at least in like 2021 and some parts of 2022, if they're going to be able to meet. Uh, but I don't know, there have been so much stuff about 2019 pre-pandemic world that were just unsustainable. And so I want to hear just your thoughts about like what do you think is coming back and what do you think is not coming back, and what are your thoughts about it?
I think online learning to an extent is here to stay. to the extent that it's grown. I mean, I think we're going to go back to school. People are going to go back into classrooms, of course. But now, if a student or if a teacher is sick enough that they can't be in person without endangering people, but well enough that they can sit here and talk, they could still attend their class or still teach their class remotely, not as a regular matter, but I think we're going to see more of like a hybrid world. Small jazz venues, speaking of entrepreneurs, Spike Wilner of Smalls Jazz Club in Mesro, he's set up a nonprofit. He's been doing live streams every day at Smalls throughout the pandemic. But he's been live streaming shows from there since 2007, all of which are archived. So talk about being ahead of the game. But this is one way that brick and mortar music venues could really expand their audience, right? You can come to the show in person, but you can also watch a live stream. So I think, Ehud, you very well could be right that people are going to want to break from their computers. But I'm sorry, we are all thoroughly addicted to our phones. Well, I should say I am, and everybody I see is. And no, you're good. That's good.
No, I'm guilty. I'm like
You're
the
guilty,
most.
right?
Yeah.
So people are still gonna scroll around, and they're still gonna see stuff, and they're still gonna check it out. And I think, for my part, speaking personally, I really miss recording with people live. I got to do a little bit in the summer at a studio in Manhattan that had very strict COVID protocols, and we did some live recording together, and that was such a breath of fresh air. I'm not super eager to do the kind of multi-track thing that is all out of sync, right? Like one person puts down a part, sends it to the next person, that person puts down a part, that it doesn't feel, it's not nearly as satisfying, and so I can't wait to be recording with people in person again, and of course playing live with people in person again. But I wouldn't be opposed, to occasionally releasing home recorded content online as a way to say, hey, this is something new I'm working on, or hey, I'm going to do this spontaneous pop-up concert from my living room. If you want to send a donation, here you go. I think that will, Facebook Live was a thing pre-pandemic, but it exploded in the pandemic age. And I don't think that's going away,
Yeah. I agree. I think people are addicted to they're psychologically and physically addicted to their devices. So, the whole ethics of relating to other human beings has been severely shaped by this, especially in the younger generations, like teenagers or, high school people who are now growing up in this environment. So I don't know. I don't like making predictions. I hope that society emerges out of this in a kind of a post-liberal society, like after having surpassed already, having determined the death of neoliberalism as the leading economic ideology that has been reigning, in the world for the past 30 years, and now kind of like the collapse has become evident. So I'm hoping that art manages to find the way out of this by showing a different possibility that is more based on, from the local, trading that you have to, global transaction. And I think this will remain. So I think, online programs, online classes where you can offer, full scholarship for anyone around the world, because it doesn't cost you much to add a student here. There are many things that in terms of like social entrepreneurship that I think will be like dramatically improved, and I think this will remain. And I think we'll understand better, like what does it mean to make music together in the same space. We'll remember that and take that very deeply. And maybe this will also maybe the audience will also give a new value to the idea of listening to live music. Maybe for the majority of people here, when was the last time you heard live music? If not in like either in the subway station or something. The other day I was walking on the street, and I think, where is it? I think it's on Columbus or an Amsterdam Avenue, there's always a jazz trio in the corner of like maybe what 80th Street and Columbus, you know. And I remember like for 5 minutes I heard that sounding like, whoa, it was so incredibly powerful that it reminded me like, oh my God, like I would pay money to experience this. So maybe it will be a reminder for for certain people who forgot, why should I pay money to go to a live performance if I can just sit and watch on my TV? And maybe, by withdrawal crisis, we'll understand the value of certain things. So I don't know if the future is brighter or not. I think I think there's a long way of darkness that we still have to overcome. But I believe that like actions like this, like what you're organizing here, Ehud, and things like this, I think that's the model. That's what I see, and a hybrid of like in person, online, and all of this is probably the gonna become the new normal.
What are your personal or not? Yeah, whatever. What are your plans for the? Like tomorrow they're announcing. It's wow, it's done, guys. Go back, do whatever you want. What are you guys doing?
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I'd probably have a session at my house, and get some musicians over here. I just miss playing with people. I'm lucky that the person I live with, my fiance, is a wonderful singer, and we make a lot of music together. Um, but we would gladly invite friends over, and just to socialize too, not even just to make music. It would be fun just to be able to gather with people without fear, without that's the insidious thing about this virus, is that it's so hard to detect in people, right? We've had other pandemics even in the last 10 years, but if somebody was infected, they knew it, everybody knew it, and we had a protocol. But that's not the case with this virus. I guess I would inquire, there were some, I was supposed to do a recording session in April with my friend Jason Anik, wonderful violinist. I played a quarantine video that we did on Sunday in the artist panel. And, we were going to make a new record. We were furiously trying to finish all these tunes in time. And we had a series of gigs and then a studio date. Well, I would want to get that rolling again, I had a concert with another dear friend, actually at part of a series at Weil Recital Hall at Carnegie Hall. We were so excited for this. That got nixed. Well, is that going to get rescheduled? That would be like one of my questions, is some of these big events, or even, I had some wedding gigs canceled. Did those people get married yet? Can we, do they still need a band? Um, so not that it would all be about like rushing into redoing 2020, not at all. But, there are certain things I was really looking forward to that maybe they can happen. Even if they happen in a slightly modified way with some social distancing, that would still be great to be able to have those in-person experiences again. But I think the first thing would be to socialize with friends, have them over for dinner, have a jam session, not stream it on anything, just for us in this room. And yeah, that's where I would start.
Yeah. Enrique, what about you?
I think I would, if everything was over, I would like catch a plane to Mitzpe Ramon and come to, your house to jam a little bit.
Yes.
And then hopefully like play with like a 40 people ensemble, all at the same time, like, and I would also like keep thinking about like ways to also create passive income in music. Our income is still too dependent on the event, on the present event. And passive income is when you have something that's creating money and that you don't need necessarily to be working all the time. So, I think we need to be smart and understand that like you only live once, and in order to have certain things in life and joys, and I don't know, we have to be strategic with our choices. So maybe, I think I would, I don't know, try to find this like balance that feels like intelligent and at the same time rewarding artistically, truth, and But yeah, I think, I would travel and like, really do a lot of get out of here. And you, Ehud?
Well, I don't know. I have a feeling that I have a feeling that once it happens, uh, many things will just like boom. I don't know. I was also when I asked you, I was thinking like I don't know. People were like flying so much. I remember there was like this talk about like Barcelona being like a city that there's like so many more tourists in Barcelona than people living in Barcelona. And I was like, I was thinking like, is that even sustainable long term? Like, is the fact that everybody are like flying around that you could just like, I live in Mitzpe Ramon, you could pay like $30 and like take a plane to Berlin. I was like, is that even real? Is that even like can the world keep going like this? And I don't know. I don't have an answer as to like, I'm not an engineer and I'm definitely not a climate engineer. But like, I definitely think that there is a chance to build things differently moving on from here. However, I do think that the physical and the face-to-face interactions and like I love having this panel, but I would so much prefer having this panel here, and have you guys here and do it live and play. And so I don't know. It's like I think there is definitely going to be a backlash to this, pandemic vibe. And this backlash is going to look like a big dance party. But I don't know.
Yeah, I hope you're right that it even though it seems crazy, it would be easy for the whole world and especially in the United States to kind of fall back into what we perceived as normal in this country, which was already super messed up, right? I think the pandemic also has exposed like people need health care. Like that's a non-starter. And if anything is good is going to come out of this pandemic, I hope it's that we've learned some of those big lessons around. You mentioned the environment and then also healthcare and inequality and all these things. And if artists, I agree with Enrique. I think artists can help shed light on these issues and also help galvanize um, collective action and encourage people to come together on saying, okay, maybe the pandemic is behind us, but now let's engage and try to be entrepreneurial in our thinking about the world we want to see next. What's the next chapter? And there are going to be other pandemics. So how can we equip ourselves now to be better prepared the next time?
Awesome. Cool. Guys, this was really fun. This was really interesting. I really hope, we can meet and play sometime really soon.
Me too.
Yeah, I personally just can't wait to get my shot and be past this thing. But I really, yeah, so like, sending my love from Mitzpe to you, and like big 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 thank you for taking the time and for bringing all your thoughtful uh, uh, thoughts about this. So yeah, I think we can, you know I think that's it. This was really
Okay.
fun, really interesting. Let me just tell
Yeah.
our listeners and our viewers that first of all, thank you so much for joining us. I hope it was as interesting for you as it was for me. Um, this is a part of Internal Compass Shalom 2020 Jazz Festival, which is our way of saying goodbye to 2020, the greatest year ever. And you're welcome to check out the rest of the events that we have this week. Some of them are masterclasses and live concerts from Mitzpe Jazz Club, streamed live. And if you like what you see, what you hear, if you want to support what we do, there is a donation link somewhere in the description of the video. either on YouTube or on Facebook. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, guys. It's been real fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.